Good evening. I'd like to call the June 25th, 2009 City of Pittsburgh Commission meeting to order. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a great crowd tonight. I would open it up for public input. Anyone here for public input? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward. We have a proclamation tonight, and I'd like to invite Jim Bush's family to come forward. I'm sorry that Patrick isn't here, but I'm grateful because I'm really excited to be able to do so. I worked with Jim on United Way, and I work with Nancy every day, so this is special. All right. Whereas Jim Bush joined Pittsburgh Beautiful in 1998, and whereas Jim served as president and treasurer of Pittsburgh Beautiful, organizing many projects during his tenure, and whereas Jim's passion for Pittsburgh is reflected in specific projects he managed, such as the YMCA Triangle, Trailhead Park, which opened in 2010, the RV and Bike Park Restroom and Pavilion projects, which opened in 2014, and the restroom project at Trailhead Park, which opened in 2017. And whereas Jim was the coordinator of the billboard signage in the Don't Litter campaign for Pittsburgh Beautiful, and whereas in 2012, Jim was honored with the Spirit of Pittsburgh Award for his involvement in the community, and whereas, the City of Pittsburgh was fortunate to have Jim as a citizen. Now, therefore, I, Don McNally, President of the Board of City of Pittsburgh, Kansas, do hereby proclaim Thursday, June 25th, 2019, as Jim Bush Day in Pittsburgh, and call upon all citizens to join Jim's family and friends in accepting this proclamation in honor of Jim and the commitment he had to improving the City of Pittsburgh.
I'm a Bush.
I know Kim has a few words, so.
I had to write them down, so excuse me while I read this. But on more than one occasion, I heard Jim say that he considered Pittsburgh Beautiful an extension of the city or an arm of the Parks and Recreation Department. He was committed to making our community better and would often call to ask what our next need was within the department. Jim was more than just an amazing friend of the city. He was a great mentor to those of us in the Parks and Recreation Department and the students of Pittsburgh State University Construction who were fortunate enough to work with him. He would find problems, then assist in figuring out solutions, find funding sources to fix issues, and then he would assume the role of project manager. Jim would be on project sites every day, and most importantly, he would make sure that we agreed on any issue, no matter how large or small, before he let contractors, students, or city staff move forward. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Jim's beautiful wife, Carolyn. Carolyn could not have been any more accommodating during my trips to their kitchen table or back porch swing, where Jim and I would go over project finances or pick out brick colors, or all the time she must have spent in the car while we had quick meetings on project sites. Nothing with Jim was quick, whether it was a phone call or a quick meeting at a project site. Thank you to all the family for sharing your parents with us. They truly were advocates for the City of Pittsburgh and the Parks and Recreation Department. I am beyond grateful for the lessons and guidance that Jim provided me, and proud of all of the successful projects that we were able to complete together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to members of Pittsburgh Beautiful for being here tonight.
Thank you very much. That's great. I know, Bill, someone's got a job, you know. Mail's gotta go out. That's my shoes, Phil. Thanks, everybody.
Congratulations, thank you.
Thank you.
Dad would be very proud to have been here.
Moving on to consent agenda. Are there any items to be pulled out? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. I move to approve. Moved by Sarah, seconded by Dan. Roll call vote?
Chenoweth. Aye. McNally.
Aye.
McNay.
Aye.
Munsell.
Aye.
O'Brien.
All right, motion passes. We'll move on to special presentation, the 5-year financial forecast.
Evening, Commissioners. On Saturday, May 18th, city staff and the city commission got together on a Saturday and went through the 5-year financial plan for about, I don't know, 7 hours or however long it was.
Just felt that way.
And we're here tonight to review it publicly and just ask that you accept it as a report into the city's reports. And Daron and I will be sharing commentary on it as we go through it. So with that, turn it over to, well, I guess I'm starting off. On page 1 of the document, why do we need a 5-year financial plan? There's several reasons why we do it. It helps develop strategies and achieve goals and objectives. It assesses the implication today's decisions have on future financial viability. It identifies programs and services that may be offered or eliminated. It increases bond ratings by rating agencies. And we analyze revenue and expenditure trends for improved decision making. And we try to incorporate the Vision 2030 into our financial planning and budgeting. And with that, I'll turn it over to Daron.
Well, first I want to acknowledge the staff. You guys have seen this at least twice, some of you 3 or 4 times. Jamie and his crew pulled together with less and less fuss every year, but we took some of the graphs this year and compared them to the 5-year financial plan that was from 5 years ago, because we do one every year, just curious to see how we were projecting. And lo and behold, when it came to reserves, we were supposed to, if we would stay the course that we set in 2014, we would actually meet our reserve levels in 2018, which happened this year. So that's not an accident. That's due to Jamie yelling at us all the time to quit spending money, usually after September. But as you look at those things, I think you need to appreciate that this isn't just a bunch of words and it's not a bunch of graphs. This is truly a plan that ties to the annual budget, which you adopt every year. There's nothing in that annual budget that is not in this plan from year to year. And maybe the biggest tie-in is, I think a lot of the community is unaware of the Vision 2030 process, but when I was hired back in 2012, I was handed a document by Blake and others and said, hey, implement this if you want the job. And so we talked a lot about how that would go, and the city took up the lead on that. We had luck with the community in getting a lot of those things accomplished, so we rehashed it 5 years later, came up with some new goals, and in that process, we created a new steering committee, and they decided that we needed to add a couple of things. So what you'll see on the second page is the 6 new focus groups, or areas of focus. Housing is still in there. Economic development is still in there. Public wellness is still in there, and infrastructure. We also have added education and marketing. I think it's important to understand that as you add things like education, it quickly is apparent that the city has a very small role in education. We are going to be completely in support when it comes to that, which drives the point that this is a community plan. But it's important to note because it's what drives our budget, it's what drives our finances, and it's why we do the things we do. If you look at the bottom of the page, you can see housing and a couple of things that are that are in there. Basically, we've picked 2 items for every one of the areas of focus and said these are what we're going to strive for. And with the help of the commissioners at the recent strategic planning sessions, we've identified metrics for that. I know my review and the staff's review and how the city performs will be measured against that. So I do think it's important that the community understands that we're not just getting up every day and doing whatever Daron wants or doing whatever Jay wants or doing whatever Tammy Nagel wants. Well, most of us are doing what Tammy Nagel wants.
Let's be real.
But for the most part, we're following this plan, and we're trying to partner with the other businesses and entities in this community, like the school districts, to make sure that the things in this plan become actual programs and services in our community. I'm not going to read through all of the IP 2030, but I do want to say thanks to Blake's efforts. You can catch it on the Chamber's website. You can catch it on the city's website. And I think it's a good idea if everybody at least pulled that down and took a glimpse through it, because it'll give you an idea of why we're doing the things that we're doing and how it ties into the city's budget.
Yeah, as we go through this document, there's going to be like 3 or 4 sections we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about revenues, expenditures, debt, and reserves, and then recommendations at the end, okay? So if you look on page 5 of your document there, or 39 if you look on the agenda number, it's page 5 in the document though. I've got 2018 actual revenues by source. In 2018, the city brought in actual dollars of $35.1 million.
Jamie. Unfortunately.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Falling down on the job. Okay, this pie chart here, it shows the various sources of revenue that the city operates under. The 3 biggest or 3 largest sources of revenues are sales taxes, property tax, and utility revenues. Those 3 revenue sources account for 71% of the city's revenue, with sales tax being the largest revenue source. On the next page, 6, talk a little bit about assessed valuation. This graph at the bottom here is 2016 actual through 2018 actual, 29 projected through 2023. If you look at the graph back in 2016, the city's valuation as a whole was about $119 million. In 2018, a major shift happened and the city grew to almost $128 million. That was with the Kansas Crossing Casino and Hampton Inn Hotel came into town, and that grew our assessed valuation by about 8.5% in 1 year, which was pretty, never had seen that before, so that was really a big boon to the economy. And I'm showing the graph is projecting a trend upward, be over $130 million going forward. And you guys can ask questions anytime as I'm going through this. Page 7. This chart here shows the valuations and the mill rate and the tax dollars that's generated by that. If you look at it, the city has held the line on taxes for 2017, 2018, 2019, and we're going to hold the line in 2020 as well. No property tax increase recommended. The next page, page 8. This is just a couple pie charts I threw in here to kind of give you an overview of like for $100,000 residents in Pittsburgh, the various taxing entities that are involved. You have the city, it's about 1/3, Crawford County is about 1/3, and USD 250 is about 1/3. And then there's a couple little ones. 1 mil on a $100,000 home in Kansas is $11.50 a year for 1 mil. 1 mil on a commercial property valued at $100,000 is $25 a year. Is what it would generate. On page 9, it's just another breakdown of the mill rates by the taxing districts in Pittsburgh as of 2019. The total mill rate's 155.5 mills, with the city, county, and USD 250 all being around 50 mills each. Page 10 is sales tax, and I'll let Daron talk something about that.
So the sales tax, this is a very interesting chart. It clearly shows, you know, we have a 9% sales tax in this community, and that seems like a lot, and I think it's a lot. And I think as you talk to people, they think it's a lot. The problem with that number is 72% of it's the state sales tax. The city gets 17% or less than 1/5 of the sales tax generated here locally. And we do a lot with it, but when people complain, Missouri, for instance, their state sales tax is 4.225. So they literally have more, the difference in the sales taxes is more than our entire sales tax that we get locally. Now, we have 2% sales tax that we could put out there by statute. We could go up to 2. We're at 1.5. I think that's pretty good. But I think it's very important that people understand that you know, the lion's share of that money goes to the state of Kansas. If we collect it, we send it up, and they send a little bit back to Jamie when he calls them. But the good thing about sales tax, it's critical for us, and we do a lot with the 1.5% that we have. The table on the next page shows you the 6 different programs, if you will, that are funded through the sales tax. Some of them are combined, but for maybe the most important thing to notice in there is that about half of those are for capital improvements, the other half are for operating. Normally, sales taxes go to capital improvements. You don't really use them. When people set up budgets, traditionally the property tax goes for operations, police and fire and administration. The sales tax goes for capital improvements. That's why it's capped at 2%. In Pittsburgh, our property tax has been so flat for so long that it became important to do some core services like economic development, and you know, the auditorium is a very good example of something that people decided, hey, we need to have this. It needs to be an operation. It needs to be funded, and we did it with a sales tax. Public safety is another good example, and then obviously the 2 street sales taxes, which are all critical. It's a big deal. The next page, page 12, shows you that what could be expended. You know, 2%. You know, what if we had 25% more money coming in from the sales tax? What could we do? Quite frankly, we could probably double the sales tax. We wouldn't even touch our deferred maintenance backlog, but 1.5 is a good number, and we're obviously maximizing it as we go. If you look at the chart at the bottom, the collections in 2017 to 2018, there's a drop-off. That's the year that we took the public safety sales tax, which paid for this building and fire station number 1, and retired the debt a couple of years early thanks to Jamie's stewardship, and that was a ½ cent that came off. But in lieu of the condition of the streets, we put a ½ cent back on, so the net was a drop of a ½ cent. But overall, the amount of money we had for roads doubled, so that was good. That's what happens when you have good fiscal management and you pay off your debt early. If you go to page 13, or 57 on the one I'm looking at, this basically just shows the retail sales tax for the last 10 years. This is an important chart, okay? This is, if your sales tax is funding the core programs in your community, then have a strong performance is critical, and it needs to grow every year. With Jamie's help, I think you can see that we've charted 2009 through 2018. We're basically at a 12-year high right now, and a lot of that is a result of the pull factor that you hear Blake talk about. The pull factor, I think, is about 1.78, 1.79. Basically, 1 is even. If everybody in Pittsburgh bought everything that they buy in Pittsburgh, it would be 1. Anything below 1 means people in Pittsburgh are shopping outside of the community. Anything above 1 means people from outside are shopping here. So 1.78 is approaching, quite frankly, getting twice as much for the folks that live here. That's a big deal. That's why that number's up, and it's why right now using those sales taxes to pay for those critical services is working. Jamie?
All right, I'll talk a little bit about franchise tax on page 14 now. A franchise fee is a fee the city receives for utilities that operate in the city's right-of-ways. We've currently got 4 franchise fees, one for electricity, one for natural gas, one for cable TV, and one for landline phones. The electricity one is the largest one. Due to its cost, it generates more franchise fees. Natural gas is smaller, but it still generates the second largest amount, and it's mainly commodities driven, depending on the price of natural gas going up and down. Cable TV franchises have been declining for several years now. Everybody seems to be going to internet use, and there's federal regulations that states that internet use is not taxable, and for those kind of things. And landline phones have really just tanked down quite a bit, and there's nothing you can do about cell phone usage. It's all the airwaves and everything. But altogether, those generate about $1.5 million a year in general fund revenue currently. Page 15 is our casino gaming revenues since its inception. If you look at this chart, on this page, it's got a steady upward incline there, which is good. We're currently averaging about $30,000 a month in gaming revenues, which is about right on their projection. I think they projected $30 to $31 million in total revenue generation at the casino, and so 1% of that's approximately $30,000 a month. So they know what they're doing there, and they're doing a good job. And that money all goes into the general fund as well. Page 16. This chart at the bottom is just a graph for the general fund major sources of revenues. You can see by the red on the bottom, that's the sales tax portion. It's the largest generating revenue for the general fund, and the blue is the property tax. And the other ones are some transfers and the franchise tax. But you can see how Pittsburg has gone from being a property tax funded operation in the general fund to more of a sales tax over the last several years. Page 17, this is our water sales consumption chart for the last several years. It's basically just flat. I mean, it's just stable. I mean, we haven't added and we haven't lost any large water customers. It's just pretty much been staying flat for several years now. And I'm projecting it'll stay like that unless we, bring in a large manufacturer or something that uses a lot of water. Page 18 is just another bar graph that shows the revenue from the public utilities. The blue is water and sewer, and the little green tips there on top is what the stormwater generates. The utility systems generate about $8.5 million a year in revenue, all total. Page 19, we'll start talking about expenditures, and I'll let Daron do some commentary on that.
So the pie chart you see in front of you is actual expenditures, not budgeted, $34.5 million. Sounds like a lot of money, it is. I think it's pretty clear that personal services, as Jamie always reminds me, we're a service agency. It's what we do. So we have people and we give them stuff and they go out and provide services for the most part. Hopefully you understand that and realize that there's an enormous amount of services that we can provide. I think for the number of employees we have, we provide an incredible level of service, but we also, Kim's a good example, we also provide a lot of services. I mean, quite frankly, when you get into the Parks Department and see all the different programs, and you realize how few park employees we actually have. It's amazing what we get accomplished. But they're great at it. They've been doing it a long time. Personal services is basically salaries and benefits. It's about 40% of the budget. We have 295 full-time equivalents. That's all through the year. Contractual services quickly is basically our insurance, our group health insurance, software agreements, utility costs are included in there. Commodities are the materials we need to perform the job, so that's what we give the employees to go out and do whatever they need to do, including gas and oil for the engines and equipment maintenance, concrete, rock, all the materials that Matt uses to build the streets. And you know, that's probably just, if you look at a lot of these, that's a pretty balanced chart. Usually personnel services are right around 40%. Nothing in here stands out, but I think, you know, debt service is $4 million. That's generated basically off of basically 8 mils of property tax, so we try to keep that pretty constant, but it's a good balance. If you go to page 20, the expenditures by program, you know, maybe the most interesting thing on this chart is if you look at the 4 things on the left, public safety, public operations, capital outlay, and debt service, that's about 2/3 of the budget. As you head to the right, you can see it really trickles off. One thing that always makes me feel good, you know, as we go out and talk to people, you hear a lot of people that are concerned with how much money we spend with all the economic development that's going on in the community. If you look at this chart, the last box on the right, if you're at home and you can't see it, I think all of our things are better. You can probably read it. It says 2%. We get a lot of bang out of our buck thanks to Blake Benson, Pitt State University, the private businesses in this town. They invest. They're the reason we've spent $500 million in 6 years on this community. It's not because the city, because quite frankly, the city doesn't have that kind of money. But we have spent 2%, and we will spend 2% again this year. I wish we could do more, but right now, it's good to know. And if you look at these from left to right, hopefully, if you're a commissioner, I'm not sure if staff, if we really have an opportunity to complain if we don't like the way it's laid out. But it's kind of laid out in hopefully in order of importance. You know, public safety is right there where it should be. And then as you go through, health claims are in the middle. And as you get to the end, obviously the library, which is an unbelievable place, but it doesn't take a lot of cost to run it, thankfully, for endowments and the number of employees that are over there. It kind of lays out the way that you would think Pittsburg, or at least I think Pittsburg should lay out. Those are our priorities.
Okay, page 21, I'll talk a little bit about the city's health insurance plan. As you all know, health insurance costs keep going up all the time, every year. And this is like the last, this is actual last 10 years for the city. The city used to be with a carrier up until 2014. At the end of 2014, we got an estimate for the 2015 year that was going to increase about $400,000, and we said we can't do that. We cannot afford to do that. So we looked at other options, and we took a different approach and did a lot of managing internally on our different health care options, and we carved everything out and kind of controlled who we do business with that way. At the end of 2014, we had $168,000 in the bank for our health reserves, health plan reserves. At the end of 2018, we've got $685,000 in the bank for the health plan reserves. So we've managed over the last 5 years to keep the employees' health care costs the same and the city's contributions the same, which is unheard of in this day and age. So it's worked out well for us so far. On page 22 is a capital improvements discussion, and Daron will take over on that.
You know, there's not a ton to say here. Capital improvements, I think the things that jump out, what is a capital improvement? Capital improvement's a permanent fixed asset. You know, a street, a road, a bridge, a building. So I think most of us understand that. The city's fixed assets, right now we have a net value of just under $100 million. And best practices are you spend 5% of that amount on maintenance. That would be about $5 million. Or excuse me, approximately $50 million. That would be $5 million a year on maintenance. We come in somewhere around 8 million, I think. We have a 5-year capital plan that you approve every year. There's really only 1 year in there that's actually budgeted, and it's the first year. Everything after that is a place for us to put every project that we know about, regardless of what road it is, regardless of what building. If it's out there and Kim knows that she needs to improve it, whether she has money or not, we put it in that plan and we estimate the amount. So if we ever do come into a windfall, if we ever do decide to issue some bonds, we don't have to go out and estimate 15 projects and figure out what they cost. We have the numbers, we know what's next on the list, and whether it's a road or a building, you can prioritize quickly. And I think most importantly, it's good for the community to see what's out there. It doesn't mean we're going to do everything that's in that plan, but it means that we've got a pretty good idea within the city of Pittsburgh what the need is, and that there's a priority of what's going to get done when. So the expectation's there. I'm not going to go through the projects. South Rouse is in there. It was in there last year. It's still being completed. All of the milling and overlay that's in here was done last year. There's a whole new program going on for this year. But I think it's important to know that Cameron and Matt and the staff take it very serious. They do keep these estimates up to date. They do know the condition of our assets. And Jamie's been very good about letting us take 8 mills out of the property tax every year and having a manageable capital program so we can at least address the most important issues based on what the commission thinks. So it works, and it could always work better, but believe me, it could be a lot worse. There's a lot of communities that don't have any money for capital maintenance, and nothing is being done.
All right, I'm going to skip over to page 24 and talk a little bit about the city's debt service, or debt that we carry. At the start of 2019, or at the end of 2018, the city had $36.1 million in outstanding debt. This is broken out in several ways. We used several different debt depending on what kind of project we're funding. GO bonds are bonds that are funded with property tax money and or utility money. Sometimes we have utility GO bonds that we do some utility projects with, and that's all paid for with utility revenues. We have state revolving loan funds with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment that we do improvements to our water plant and our wastewater plants. We have special assessment bonds that was utilized to put in the utility infrastructure for the casino to our facilities at no cost to the city. That's all being paid for by the casino through a special assessment, and we get to retain the asset. So it was a win-win for the city. We also have some TIF bonds for the TIF district, which the city has no responsibility for. We have to show them. And the Transportation Development District, which is also the TIF district, that paid for the infrastructure improvements for the street and water and sewer lines there back in 2008, I believe it was. Those are paid for in the TIF district with the sales tax and property taxes that were the added value for the improvements there, and then a special 3/10 of a sales tax for the transportation district. As Daron alluded to earlier, we try to keep the mill rate at around 8.5 mills a year. That way there's no fluctuations in the mill rate going up high one year and then low next year, depending on if you're issuing bonds or paying bonds off. It's just, if you keep it flat, you can have a balanced plan of improvements. Like we generally issue bonds about every 2 years or so. And so by just keeping that mill rate level that pays for that debt service on those bonds, there's no fluctuation in the property taxes that way. The next page is an interesting little chart here. Kansas statute says a city cannot issue more than 30% of their assessed valuation in debt, in GO debt. And Pittsburgh is on this chart is currently about just about $16 million in GO debt, And based on our valuation, our limit would be 45 million. So we're quite a ways away from that, the mandated debt limit in there, which shows that we're being responsible with the taxpayers' money as far as issuing debt. The next page on 26 is a graph that shows all the debts, types of debt, and when they fall off in what year. The bottom red one is our GO debt. It goes out to like 2032 be the last year on that one. The green at the top goes all the way out to 2037. That's the special assessment debt on the casino utilities. But the rest of it falls all in there between. It just kind of shows how the debt just keeps falling off every year. It gets lower and lower. On page 27, I'll just talk a little bit about reserves now. Page 27, this chart here just shows the bar graph for restricted and unrestricted reserves. I won't get into too much detail on that, but there's a difference between unrestricted means you can just use them for whatever purpose you need them for. Restricted means they're dedicated to a certain purpose. Page 28. This is what Daron was talking about earlier when he said he went back to 2014, 5 years ago, and looked at our 5-year financial plan then. And this graph here, that black bar, is our reserves goals for the general fund, where they should be. It's 16% approximately, which is approximately 2 months of your budgeted expenditures. You can see in 2016 and 2017 we weren't there yet. We were still under reserved, and starting in 2018 we finally got to that goal, and I'm projecting we'll stay right at that goal if we as based on our recommendations and assumptions in this 5-year financial plan, which is, it shows we're practicing sound management. And when you have to go through a bond rating for a bond issue, this is the kind of stuff that they really look at, and it makes a difference on your interest rates for borrowing.
Another thing to keep in mind, if you look at the chart, I guess the question should be, the line between the red triangle and the green is going up. So we obviously were making up some ground heading out of below the reserve level. Boom, we crossed it. Now why wouldn't we just continue to just have the green just go on forever and ever and ever? You need to be careful when you start reducing tax rates, because what you're going to find out in about another page is the cost of everything that we're paying for is going up. And as much as this community's done, I think this year is a good example. Maybe in the budget in 2 weeks, you're going to see the assessed valuation number, and it's probably as high as it's, I mean, I know I've been here 7 years. It's never even been positive for half of that time, let alone be where it's at. The result of that is we just want to maintain right now. We don't need 3 times the reserve level that's required, because A, we're probably overtaxing our citizens if we do that, and it's unnecessary, and I think they would rather keep more money in their pocket than give it to us so we could just build up some ridiculous reserve. But it is important that we're going to monitor that line, because we need to stay above it. But right now, for the next 4 years, as you look out to 2023, this projection is with our current tax rate, but with a small, very small assessed valuation growth of less than 0.5% per year. So right now things look good, but the importance of doing a 5-year plan is any of those factors can change. And the year they do, you don't want to just pull this thing out in 5 years and go, oh wow, this thing cratered out 2 years ago. We should have done something about it. But it's great to be in the green. As Jamie always says, green is good. And he's put a lot of work in his staff to get us there. So I wanted to point that out.
The next page, 29, is the public utility operating reserves. They're all above the black line. You can see from 16, 17, 18, we had this build up of reserves, and that's when we were putting money aside to do the water towers, because they cost almost $900,000 to do 2 water towers, sandblast and paint them and refurbish them. And we did that last year, so that's why it's dropped back down now on the reserves. And we continue to do a lot of infrastructure improvements with those funds as well going forward. This year, we're doing a bunch of water meter replacements all through town. Some of our meters were getting to be over 15 years old. Okay, summary and recommendations. I'll let Daron talk some about that.
All right, so just about a page and a half, and we'll get to any questions if you have them. So current decisions and plans will have a direct impact on our financial stability. That's why these meetings are important. External factors are those that the city has very little control over. Some examples include property valuations. It sounds like we would have some control over that. We don't. The county sets that. It's based on the investment. We've knocked down a lot of houses, so you'd think we'd be working against that. But at the same time, we've had, Gary Dennett's put up 17 houses in the last 2 years. Pittsburg Highlands put up 20, now another 25. We've got plans for Silverback to put in 50 up to 160. Eventually, you've got to put back what you knock down. When you start doing that and you swap dilapidated for new, you start turning the corner on that property valuation number, and that's where you want to be. The stronger the property valuation, yes, your tax bill is going to go up a little bit, but it's also more wealth that you have. It's like having a new car versus a beater. You don't have to pay for the beater, but you're not going to get anything out of it either. That value is gone. So it's a trade-off, but it's something that all communities strive for. You want to have an uptick in your valuations whenever possible. Unusual weather, we all know how that can affect your bottom line. Intergovernmental funding, the state's always doing something with a property tax lid or some of the ad valorem money, and it comes and it goes, and heck, quite frankly, they collect our sales tax, and we're never sure if we're getting it all or not, just based on some of the numbers. I think by the end of the year, we always get caught up, but month to month, it'll drive you crazy when you track it. So health insurance costs are one that we're just going crazy, and we basically just made the call and changed it, but these things traditionally are out of your hands. So what do you do about it? Well, we make some assumptions and we put these plans together, and for the most part, we're a pretty conservative bunch. Jamie is a leader on our finances. He's probably maybe a little more conservative than I am, and I'm extremely conservative, so that tells you where we are. For this year, for this 5-year plan, we have a 2% annual sales tax collection growth for the period. That's under where we are right now. I think maybe we're at 1.8. I think we were up above 3 last month, but it's dipped. But it's pretty consistent. Gaming revenue, it's projected at $345,000. They've got plans out there to grow that. They're a casino. They're doing well. There's a lot of other businesses. But right now, we just have the numbers we have, and so we track it like that. Commissioners at working day recommended no utility rate increase in 2020. So you see that reserve number. You see that we've moved past our minimum reserve level. We've paid for the big water towers. We can continue our $250,000 a year water line improvements and continue the other improvements. So it looks like the budget we'll recommend in 2 weeks will not have a utility increase in it. It should be the 4th year in a row that the budget will not have a property tax increase in it. Other considerations, and you can read the list yourself. We need to keep a structurally balanced budget. That's a simple way of saying we need to spend less than we bring in. We need to make good decisions because they all affect that. We need to continue to practice long-term planning. That's critical. And we need to provide programs and services guided by the IP 2030 goals. That's really the marching orders from the community. These are the things that we know we need to do, and to the extent that we can do them, we will. So the recommendation for the budget, like I said, we're going to have a 1% cost of living increase for the upcoming year for the employees. Every other year, we're still looking at hopefully paying for up to 2% merit increase on top of that. That's the pattern that you've come to the last couple of years, and it seems to be working. There's minimal changes to the debt service. We won't let that fluctuate. And the utility rate by 1% will go on as planned in this budget after next year, but we'll get to make that decision every year. That is the 5-year financial forecast. It's online, I'm assuming.
It will be online tomorrow.
It's a good piece of work. The staff does a great job. I appreciate you guys have heard it twice now, just this one. But it's good for the citizens to hear us talk about it, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. And good job, Jamie.
Jamie, I know it's here somewhere, but what were your projections on increased valuation over the next 5 years?
I was using like 1/4% just to be conservative. I believe it's gonna be about 3% though this year, based on the new housing starts and some commercial construction going on.
I think one of the things that strikes me, I don't know if this is meaningful or not, but on our revenues by source, we're fairly balanced. I mean, it's in terms of the percentage, they're all 25, 25, 21, and then the rest add up to 29. I mean, I think that's an indicator of a good strategy that you're not depending on one funding
Right.
source more than the other.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right,
Yeah.
so I appreciate that. That's good fiscal management.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate that a lot of this presentation was for the people of Pittsburgh, and I would really encourage people, when this is posted on the website tomorrow, to check it out. And also, as Daron said, that the Imagine Pittsburgh 2030 vision plan is now online. So if you go to the website and you go to city government and you go down and then you go over to economic development, it's like the first one over there, Imagine Pittsburgh 2030. And that really is the plan. We've had 3 strategic planning sessions now that we're using to guide the budget and the vision and future for Pittsburgh. So I really think that it would benefit everybody out there to check out that plan and to give us any feedback. We'll have an open hearing again when the time to approve the budget rolls around. And so I really think that that's a really good place for people to be involved in what the city's doing. So yeah, thanks Jamie for doing this. And this is good government. It's always forward thinking. So.
Thanks.
So we've had health insurance expenses increase, but you have not passed that on, we've not passed that on to our employees.
No,
Yeah.
we have not.
That's-
Nor has the city contributions increased either for 5 years, which, you know, like I said before, it's pretty unheard of in
Yes.
private sector
Yeah.
or in other agencies.
And I know that being self-insured consumes a lot of resources, city resources. It takes a lot to manage that.
Yes,
So
it does.
I applaud you. 'Cause it's not easy.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of due diligence. So.
I've learned a lot in the last 5 years.
Probably never wanted to learn that stuff. You can consult now.
I just wanted to thank Jamie, you, and thank Daron, and thank everybody that's put this together. We went over it on working day. I was impressed then. It looks like trends are moving in the right direction. It looks like financially we're in good shape, and I just want to give credit to the management and to the people that are involved in doing that. So thank you guys very much. Good job.
Thank you.
It's the staff, the whole staff puts.
Yeah, and I wanted to, if I would start naming everybody,
Yeah,
everybody out
I
there
know,
is part
I
of
know.
this, so. But you do a lot, Jamie, and so thank you.
So there's no action required.
I'm just asking that you guys formally accept it as a city document, and I'll put it on the city's website, or I'll have someone put it on the city's website tomorrow. I do not know how to do that. So,
If there needs to be a motion, I'll make a motion to accept this, to put it on the website.
And I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion made by Sarah, seconded by Dan to accept the 5-year financial forecast. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I think any non-agenda reports and requests, Aaron?
I want to acknowledge Patrick, who's in the hospital today. Hopefully he's getting out. Obviously, I want to acknowledge the infrastructure improvement to this room. For 7 years, I've heard from at least 2 commissioners at a time that we can't see you, you can't see us, people can't see each other, what are we doing? So I'm telling you, that I know the staff missed it by maybe a meeting. We planned on having you here for the last meeting. in the last table, maybe it just made us appreciate this table even more. But this is also the courtroom, so the judge and the prosecutors and the staff also use this room. But I think it would be hard to imagine a better improvement as far as the choice of wood, the colors, the layout. And I don't think people at home can appreciate that you now have a visual aid in front of you under glass so you can see that. I know we don't give enough credit to the staff, and we didn't go out and just hire some contractor and pay 40, 50 grand for this. We did a lot of it in-house. It took a lot of work, and we've had some very skilled people that work for the city, and I think not just with their hands, but with their brains, and they made this thing quite an improvement. So thanks. If any of them are here, and if not, they should be watching it on TV and know that we're thanking them that way. But
I'd also like to shout out, it sounds like 620 Day was very successful. I went shopping Saturday afternoon and went to several of the boutiques, and they all said that they had great turnout, great revenue. So applaud city staff and the Downtown Advisory Committee that put that together. I think you can chalk that up to a good event. So
1,000 people.
1,000 people. Wow.
I have
That's a lot of people.
question, Daron. I've received several calls with concerns on the South Route project. Could you maybe explain where that is and what's going on out there?
What are their concerns, Commissioner?
Just some of the safety concerns. There's a temporary road. There's a safety issue. Some of the concerns that they had were not positive. Just put it that way. But is there a time frame that we're looking at that the people that live there can look forward to that being completed? Do we have a date or?
Well, right now it rains every other day, Commissioner, so I live there. I've yet to hear from anybody that thinks that road's unsafe. I've heard from a few people that think their low riders aren't high enough to pass on that road. I'll remind you, it's a state project. The city has a considerable investment in it because Cameron knows that I'll be calling him every day, asking him what the contractor's doing. I've got the contractor's number. The only safety issue I can see on that road that's been reported to me by the police department is impatient drivers bucking around the detour and heading the wrong way down Rouse on the unimproved side.
I think
Oh, go ahead.
I'm saying, I think the last time you reported there were 60, or maybe Cameron said that, 60 working days.
Yeah, unfortunately, 30 days have passed and they've
Right.
worked for 6 of them.
Yeah.
It's an extremely wet project. It's an extremely tough area of construction with the hospital. But unless you can be something very specific, I do just say I'm proud of the project. I'm proud of the contractor. I'm proud of the improvement it's going to be. And as the same thing with weed cutting, the same thing with the paving projects. Everybody needs to remember how wet this year's been, and the 2 days of not having rain has not changed anything. It's supposed to rain next week. It rained this weekend, and rain is going to win. So I appreciate everybody's patience. We sent out a nice letter, I think, 10 days ago to everybody on the project, but I don't have any safety concerns that reach my desk, Commissioner.
And Chuck, if they do have specific concerns, either they should call someone.
Sure, I'm sure they have.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have.
I think we were remiss in last meeting shouting out to Matt and his team for picking up all the debris after the storms, the city staff. I mean, I think you said that Wednesday of the last day of pickup, that was the cleanest our town will ever be in terms of limbs, so.
800, how many
How
left?
much?
It was a lot. Yeah, and parks and streets and stormwater. On non-agenda, real quick, we started South Broadway yesterday with the Milton overlay, so if you haven't been down there, there's lots of cones, use lots of caution. They'll start, hopefully, if it doesn't rain tomorrow, we'll start laying some asphalt back, and they'll do the outside lanes and the inside lanes. Hopefully, in the next 2 weeks, they'll move on to the north end of Broadway from 21st up to Atkinson, and then finally they'll go back into Stillwell, into those neighborhoods before it's all done. With the completion around the 1st of August, if we can get weather to play nice for a while. But just heads up to everybody, there are lots of cones coming off side streets, and be very attentive when you're in those areas, please. So.
And everyone in my neighborhood, 6th Street is looking really great. Thanks, Matt. For working on West 6th Street and 5th.
Right, anything else? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.